hand in there. You got to.
We maybe need a sound for jazz hands so that throughout any podcast recording, one knows when jazz hands are being thrown.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to Audiovisual Cultures, the podcast exploring different areas of the arts and cultural production. I'm Paula Blair and I'm delighted to present this special episode recorded at the Community Collaboration and Courage event for International Women's Day 2020, organised and hosted by creative producer for Placeholder and abstract and video artist Rachel Brook, which took place at B&D Studios in Newcastle upon Tyne. Huge thanks to our members at patreon.com/AVcultures for your continued and much valued support. And thanks as well to everyone engaging on social media. This episode cuts between several speakers introduced throughout the session, so there will be some changes in audio quality that I've tried to smooth out as much as possible. Do listen to the end for details on how you can help the podcast improve in those sorts of areas. And just so you know, there will be a wee bit of swearing. I'll hand over now to Rachel. Do enjoy this discussion.
Thank you for coming to Community Collaboration and Courage, led by Monkfish Productions and Placeholder. We are here as part of International Women's Day in solidarity as people who identify as women or as non-binary, to look at how we can counteract bias, isolation, prejudice, and encourage collectiveness and support each other through building courage via community and collaboration. As part of the discussion, we have a few people who've joined us. Ciara Lenihan, an artist and printmaker who is also a community worker and activist. We have Claire Murphy-Morgan of Monkfish Productions, a charity that brings live experiences to spaces and finds new ways of talking to audiences, as well as bringing artists together collaboratively. And we have Jess, Bennett, independent curator working with emerging artists and founder of the Curatorial Collective, which is a programme of development and support for curators outside of a university environment. And we're recording for a podcast today with Paula Blair of Audiovisual Cultures. We're going to enter into an agreement today that we will respect each other's diversity and, listen to each other and engage in a positive conversation and try and support each other, as well as providing counter perspectives and arguments and such. We don't all have to agree, but we can all respect each other. I'm going to start with Ciara. So Ciara, what is the value of community in a creative environment, and what are your experiences of this? And then to the rest of the group after that, what are other people's experiences of that as well?
I think as a socially engaged artist, I couldn't make work without community. Not only as inspiration, community also acts as a catalyst for pushing me forward in terms of support. A lot of the work that I make is informed by a lot of the activism I do. I work with a community union called Acorn voluntarily, and I help people like myself from working class backgrounds or low income backgrounds to challenge the status quo and take back things that should be theirs, like their basic human rights. So I think having community involved in my work is just something that's always going to be there. When I begin making art or begin a project, I always think about who's this project for. I'm really interested in accessibility. As a person with a disability, accessibility in the arts can be quite hard. In terms of if you haven't had an arts education, if you feel that you're not upwardly mobile enough to enter a gallery. I prefer to take art to the people, and I see the community as being my community and people in Newcastle as being truly vital to everything. A project that I'm working on at the moment involves the community of tower blocks. So there's one in the East End, that's where I live, and then one in the West End. I used to live in the West End, and these tower blocks I used to pass every day. And I'm working together with some amazing inspirational people to write a musical about, I use the term musical very loosely, to write a musical of sorts about what it's like to live in a tower block and what we imagine a tower block might think or feel, or like in the distant future, if they were to be like dug up, how would people look at that as a relic, or are they a type of time capsule? I think that community is so integral to everything I do and everything I think about. You can't live without community, you live in a community. But I've really taken a big leap in making sure that it's deeply ingrained and enmeshed in my work. Sometimes community arts gets a bad name. People think it's going to be like a load of collages, or like some bad paintings. And I never think that they're like bad collages or bad paintings. But people are like, oh, it's just going to be a lovely thing for everyone. Do a bit of knitting. It'll be great. But community arts can be radical. Community arts can be about taking charge of a situation. For me, it's about enriching a community and helping people to see their own worth and also to impact people's mental health positively, because it's something that I struggle with. And I think if the government aren't going to provide any sort of leisure services or aren't going to fund the NHS very well, so we need these sort of things to cling on to.
How do you feel that gender can essentially mean that you require a community to support you because of your identity?
Yeah, I mean, it's no secret as a person who identifies on the trans spectrum and who is also LGBTQ that there's a lot of opposition to that in the world. I've found Newcastle, thankfully, to be a very open and accepting place. I wasn't able to be out as bi or non-binary, or pan really, and non-binary when I was in Ireland, and I think moving here really helped me. I think in terms of community, I was able to make a huge leap in my practice as an artist and just in my general well-being by becoming more involved with the LGBTQ plus IA, all the letters community. I helped found the DGA, which is Drag, Genderfuck and Androgyny, and it's a group of people who enjoy drag as a pastime or as a way of life or as a way to say fuck you to the world or like love you to the world. And without that organisation, I don't think I would have become as confident. It's so amazing, not just for like myself, but to see younger people. I think the youngest drag performer we have is 14 in the DGA. Amazing. They're so cool. Shout out to Luke. You are unbelievable. But it's really amazing to see how across multiple ages and multiple gender identities that can really impact young people in a really positive way. So I think when there are so many trans people being oppressed and dying, and when people are still fighting for the right to get married or the right to like not be murdered for the person that they are, I feel incredibly lucky to be in the position that I'm in, to be in a welcoming space. And yeah, I think if you are in Ireland and you want to go and be a big gay somewhere else, come to Newcastle. Everyone is really sound.
We're recolonising. Reverse colonisation.
Yes. That's another big thing for me is I look at a lot of this sort of stuff around working with the community and in terms of my identity as a non-binary person and as a pansexual person as a way of decolonising myself and troubling that idea of, no offence to the heteronormative world, but it's a bit passé white colonialist thought to me for that to be the only way for us to live our lives.
Jess, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I think for me, like, community is extremely important, and definitely I think I've noticed that a lot more being in Newcastle compared to being back home in Liverpool or doing stuff in Manchester. I do think Newcastle is very artist-led, but at the same time we're so supportive of each other, and I think it's great to be up here and in that environment more than anything. And yeah, I think it's with that comes a lot of support, which I think we all need, because I know we all have imposter syndrome with our practices, which I'm sure we can all agree every week we probably just get inside our head. And I haven't said that, I think that was one of the main things which made me start the curatorial collective, because for me as an emerging curator I was in this very weird space where, you know, I've done traineeships and I've been getting this experience and I'm now reapplying for some other opportunities coming up, but now they're like, oh no, you're too qualified. But then I'm now applying for the entry-level curation jobs in institutions and it's like, no, you don't have enough experience yet. So I'm in this very weird in-between. You know, in my head I've been like, okay, how do I get from A to B? What do I have to do to get that experience experience, get that support, get that recognition. And one thing I did learn was voicing that to the community, and it turns out a lot of other people were in a similar situation as me. You know, it might not have been curatorial, it was like, you know, artistic, whether it be a writer, and that is what did like enforce me to make a collective, and we'd be having these conversations, these discussions, and just, you know, being very like-minded and supportive of each other, of what we can do within Newcastle. You know, it might not be me getting from A to B, but I'm supporting or maybe driving someone else's development that they get there, and I think that's really important.
Could you tell us a little bit about your curatorial collective, please?
Yeah, so this started, I think it was last August. So I'm an associate member at the Newbridge Project, and when I started, this was a conversation I did have with Naomi, who's the programme director there, because she again felt the same. Like, she's worked at Baltic and she's done a lot of stuff around the northeast, and she was like, there's loads of artist workshops and stuff tailored for artists, but nothing really for the behind the scenes people involved in exhibitions. We had a big discussion about, well, what is a curator? Because going back years ago, it is this idea of like the duty of care in a museum, but realistically that's not what it is now. You have to be able to do marketing, you have to be able to network, you have to be able to install. There's loads of, you know, I never do a curation job and it's the same as the previous one I've done. That I think it's about, you know, okay, well, how do we create a group and we start these conversations and provide these tools which can help people in the areas they probably do struggle with. So, you know, since then we did like a bit of a social to see what people wanted to get out of the collective. We've been encouraging other curators to come up and have conversations. We did a writing workshop with a local writer. Writing is something I struggle with half the time. So I think that's just important, almost providing an all-round spectrum of what people want to get out of stuff. So it is still an ongoing thing, and, you know, if anyone wants to get involved or if anyone wants to recommend anything, like, do get in touch, because I'm always wanting more workshops and more discussions more than anything.
Is there a website, URL, or an email address?
So just on Instagram at the moment, curatorial.collective, but I am working on a website currently.
Brilliant, amazing, thank you, Jess.
Okay.
Hello, would you like to add any thoughts on this subject matter?
Yeah, let me introduce me first. I'm Caroline from China.
China, Caroline, lovely to meet you, Caroline. Thank you so much for coming.
I'm a Newcastle student and I'm doing a project about International Women's Day. So I found this event, I came here with my friend. Community, to be honest, I haven't know anymore. You know, in my country, I don't know, maybe I just focus on study and work. But since I came here, I found there are lots of communities. And the last week, we've been to like a workshop. There are over 20 or 30 communities. They just help women to go back to Korea and how to be stronger. It's really inspired me.
Since you've been in Newcastle, what's your kind of experience of the arts and creativity and that sort of thing? What kind of experiences have you had, I guess?
First, people are so nice, always smile, and even just stranger, but when we, have eye contact, we'll say hello and how are you, something like this. Others, just my uni's life, it kind of difficult or challenging for us because English is not our mother tongue. So at the first, when I listened to my tutors talking about it, I couldn't catch what they're talking about. I've been here for over half years. I think my listening has improved and talking as well. I really love this place. It's not as busy as London, and I think the lifestyle is slow-paced. People have more time to enjoy their life, not just focus on the work, I think.
Do you encounter challenges as a woman in your educational practice and your creative practices? Do you feel that as a woman you need more community around you?
I'm really happy to see there's lots of community to help women. I haven't found in my country. Maybe they do help, but I just haven't got in touch with them. Yeah.
Paula, do you have any thoughts on the matter?
Yeah, I think for me, I've always found it a bit difficult to find my people, find my community. I think it took years in Belfast to become part of the arts community more broadly, and then I had to up sticks and come here and I had to move around a lot for a few years, and now I've settled in Newcastle for the past 3 years, and I feel like I'm beginning to find my people, my tribe, and quite a bit of my tribe is currently here in this room. I think it's something I value, which is why I feel like I seek it. So I feel like I'm still accumulating, but I have real trust issues as well. And I think just on the gender issue, I think a lot of my trust has been spent on specifically women who have broken my trust. And so I find that's a bit of a difficulty that I'm trying to overcome. Maybe it shouldn't, but it hurts a bit more when women have been your bullies. So it's just trying to overcome that and build trust again with new people. It's something I value, but I'm quite tentative about, if that makes sense. I'm still working through that community issue.
Yeah. I completely understand the perspective that you're coming from, and I've encountered my own experiences of loss of confidence where I've been in an environment maybe where other colleagues who are either at a similar work level as me and same gender, or who have been my senior, have made me feel less confident about the work that I do, less confident about my ability to achieve things. I think it's so important that we support each other and that we give each other motivation and recognise each other's value. And we're already up against huge challenges with regards to gender bias and inequality, and so the value of supporting each other is so important. And my experience as an artist is that I've always been a creator since I was a child, yet it's only been I'm in my 30s now, and I've only just really started to bring myself out of isolation with it. I always used to make at home and spend a lot of time on my own, and a lot of that was about trust as well. And so I've moved into B&D Studios, which is where we are today recording, and I specifically moved here because I was already working in the building, so I knew people in the building already, and I chose my studio based on the location being essentially alongside this room that we're in right now. And the importance of that was the opportunity to be able to come out of that room and speak to people and meet people. And I've already made, in 2 months that I've been here, I've made so many connections, both with people based in this building and people outside of the building who are all here today. And that's just amazing. And the confidence that you get from being around other people who either have similar experiences to you, or who you identify with, or who are rooting for you, it's one of the most empowering, brilliant things that I've ever experienced. It's really important that I maintain this community, because I know I'm the sort of person that will allow myself to retreat into my own full sort of neurotic bubble, and I can't let that happen because it affects my creativity at the end of the day. Would you like to have any thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. My name's Jenni McDermott. I'm a poet. I'm from the Northeast, and I've been performing around the Northeast for many a year now, I guess. But ebb and flow of being here and being not, as I spent quite a bit of time on the west coast of America as well. For me, I think there are so many layers of community that it's almost difficult to just give this one word to what can be applied to so much, because of course in the artist community there are so many blessings. There are curses too, of constant comparison to others, and so the community can be this convex mirror. It's a wonderful thing to feel a part of something, but even when you feel a part, you can feel very much distanced and like, I'm not at every single event, maybe I can't afford to be, maybe I just don't feel well enough, and all of those things can be difficult. But it's still the fact that many of us, I'm sure, pardon any assumption, but it's no surprise or it's no weird feeling or thought that artists can, aside from any kind of eccentricities, be vulnerable folk. We spend a lot of time on our own. It's difficult, or a lot of us do. It ain't an easy life. So community, in terms of in the arts communities, it's an essential thing, but it's a very living being, and it can be very changeable and sometimes difficult to work with, but absolutely essential to keep us all together and build us up. I was thinking about community in more of a identity manner, and certainly for me as a working class person and representing, especially because I'm a poet and poetry, it is on the rise right now. It's getting pretty big. Apparently, in terms of sales of poetry, it's at an all-time high for recent years, which is amazing. And I think it's probably because we're in pretty trying times and difficult times, and people who haven't necessarily been leaning on poetry are starting to find this as a place that they can find expression, they can express themselves. People are starting to write poetry, and it's great. But in terms of representations of working class, there's a lot in poetry, but it's not the first thing that people think about necessarily. Poetry poetry because it was very much an elitist thing, which I think is crackers is for everyone. So yeah, for me, representing the working class community is just part and parcel of what I do. How could I not do that? Such a big part of me.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Claire. Community, oh my goodness, what a huge word for everybody and different connotations for every individual here today. I think for me, looking at community in an artistic context, I think I spent a long time somehow thinking that the great artistic community of the Northeast was this great golden circle, and you cannot penetrate this great golden circle of really wonderful, dynamic people. And so for a long time I felt very much outside of that community, but now I've started to feel like I'm kind of gradually becoming more a part of our community and being able to sort of define it on my own terms. I kind of feel that a lot of those myths that I had about artists in the Northeast were myths, and that actually a lot of those people are just as insecure and worried and struggling as I've ever been. So I think it's also about breaking that down in my own head, but also as well I think class is massively important. And as somebody who studied at a comprehensive, didn't go to a fee-paying school, didn't go to Oxford and Cambridge or whatever, from the Northeast, feeling that imposter syndrome, somebody was talking about that as well, and I think that did for a long time put my reality through a sort of a filter, but it is sort of still very much there. And I think there is still this perception that the arts, darling, are somehow kind of quite middle class, but actually the vast majority of regular people are hugely creative in one way, shape or form, and it's about supporting people to give themselves permission as communities and individuals to feel that they are creative beings and that it isn't the Royal Opera House. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. It can be, let's have a sit together and do some knitting. I mean, I don't know. You know, it's that kind of creative perspective. And I think poetry is really exciting in terms of the rise of working class people who use poetry as a medium with which to share and express their realities, really. But I think what you were saying as well about curation and gatekeeping and where we show our creativity within communities is a real challenge. But I think it's really exciting, and I also think that it's something that is going to become more and more exciting and vitally important as we go through 4 more years of the Tories, for example. So, you know,
brace positions, everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
Brace.
Yeah. That's massively scary, but also massive opportunities to do creative stuff.
Sorry, Claire. I just was wondering, please, Claire, do you have a good description of what you would say imposter syndrome is or feels like for listeners, in case there's anyone who doesn't know what imposter syndrome is?
Yeah, so I think imposter syndrome is about feeling that you are not worthy of inhabiting a particular space, and it can be to do sometimes with sex or gender, it can be to do with experiences of class or a variety of different sort of identities. My understanding of it is it's a person feeling that they shouldn't be where they shouldn't be, but actually, yes, they should. They're just as entitled to being somewhere as anybody else. But it is a psychological thing. It's something that people have developed over a long time because by virtue of them feeling they shouldn't be somewhere, there's been a point where they've been told either directly or indirectly that they've got no right to be somewhere. That would be my interpretation of it. I mean, obviously everybody will have their own individual experience of it. And I think for a lot of people, a lot of women and a lot of non-binary people and people who identify as female, I think it's a massive issue for people. They just sort of feel, no, what am I doing here? I shouldn't be allowed to be here. And it's, I think for us as creative people, it's about creating spaces where people feel they should and could and absolutely are welcome to be somewhere. Don't know what other people's take are on that.
Have any thoughts on that?
I do. I agree with you. And I think whatever your gender or your upbringing is, imposter syndrome kind of makes it its home when you've got a cocktail of things. If I think back about when I lived in Ireland and when I moved here, I mean, I had a bit of imposter syndrome in Ireland. It might have been that I was a bit younger and a little bit more full of the follies of youth. Not that I'm not beautifully young now. Speaking on that idea of feeling like you're not allowed to be somewhere, I was never more aware of how different I was than when I moved to this country, because I wasn't aware I had a class until I moved here. I wasn't aware that I had a funny accent, or obviously I was aware of history. Unfortunately, not many people in this country are. No offence. That's more aimed at Tories. Yeah, I wasn't aware of all those sort of things. So getting a big opportunity like this project that I'm working on, every day I'm like, oh, but I'm just a little baby, pansexual, non-binary immigrant from the back arse of nowhere who has come over here. What have I got to do or say? Or sometimes I feel a bit weird about like getting a nice group of ragtag Geordies together, and I'm like, and I'm not like a true Geordie. I now work for Greggs, so I'm a little bit like, I've got Geordie wings, so I feel very proud of myself. But yeah, I think it's imposter syndrome comes to you when you least expect it. And also when you most expect it. It's kind of always there, actually. I wasn't as scared about what I was allowed to do until I moved here. And that goes for like England, and not necessarily Newcastle as a place. I'm talking about culturally in this country, because I mean people are super supportive here. But yeah, I wasn't ready for that. I don't think I wasn't ready for that sort of weird indirect questioning of who I am and why I'm even here. Yeah, and then it obviously all fell apart when Brexit happened, and it's a lot to contend with. That's my take on it.
I mean, I think for me, especially being a curator, a lot of big curators, especially from London, are white middle-class men. I hate to bring that up, but I am going to bring it up. But it's just, I don't know, I feel like half the time when I am doing stuff, I question myself as a woman. And I'm like, should I be doing this? Should I be putting on this big exhibition? And I know I shouldn't, but I feel like it's just looking back at curators of history that I am like, I shouldn't be here, I shouldn't be doing this half the time. And I don't even know why I think that, because, you know, even like a lot of obviously our friends at the New Bridge Project, and like even I come from such a great family where all the women in my family have such strong like work ethic. We even got like a women's like WhatsApp chat, and like if we're ever like doubting ourselves, we're just, you know, I'll always get messages to be like, Jess, stop, like, you know, get out of this mindset, like you're doing great. And I think it's almost just trying to always remind yourself that, you know, imposter syndrome is also like a counter reaction of your own journey as well. And I think you have to think about the journey you're on as an individual.
I just remembered a really valuable thing that my friend Leslie Guy once told me when I was getting a bit imposter syndrome. That's the patriarchy.
Yes.
Don't let them in. Don't let them into your soul. Don't let the patriarchy into your soul. And I was like, anytime I feel a bit impostery, then I'm like, it's the patriarchy at work here.
It's true
Chill.
though. Yeah, I think I do that though, where I'm just like, if I have a second doubt about like white middle class men in my role, I'm like, okay, go to the women who are surrounding me and get that support which I need. And I think that's important as women, that we are doing that in the creative arts.
And isn't there another thing, that you should approach things with the confidence of a mediocre white middle class man would, because that's almost more confidence that you would have as like any other person. Again, white middle class mediocre men can have problems too, and I'm not denying that, guys out there, if you're listening.
I think one of the most interesting arguments I've heard recently is that if well-educated middle-class men who are white are struggling, then there's no chance for the rest of us, you know. And you know, if you hear of people in those environments struggling, that shows that we have even more reason to be coming together and supporting each other as not men, and as creative people, and as people who want to make things happen and want to be supportive of other people and celebrate diversity. Is imposter syndrome something that people experience in China? Is that a similar, do you have a terminology for that kind of experience, or do you have something similar, or is there anything that you can relate to? Because I'm asking this question from my own ignorance to a certain extent, in that I don't know if it's an internationally valid experience or whatever, or whether there's something, is there a term or a similar wording for that experience of when you are at work or you're in an environment that you feel out of place?
For me, just if I have some problem, trouble, I think only my family or my relatives can help me. Like I mentioned, though, I didn't find any community, can help you, like have a chat and talk about your experience, dissect together. No, I haven't. I think just your family and the relatives.
That's a really interesting point, because I think your family are so important, yet sometimes our families can be part of the problem as well. I definitely know.
And most time before I came here, I worked for almost 3 years, and if I have problem with my work, I prefer to talk to my friends. I think they can give me some advice that I can accept, not like my parents. Maybe our view of something is different, and even sometimes they give me some advice I just don't accept. Yeah.
Do you feel as a woman that you feel different to the men in your places of work and in your educational environments?
Oh, this is an interesting question. My major is international multimedia journalism. My position in my company was a journalist or presenter. All of the presenters are girls, no boys. Yeah, but our supervisor are men.
So that's a man managing a group of women and managing their expectations.
Yes.
That's really interesting, yeah.
I think it's quite difficult for women to be a supervisor.
Why do you think that is?
Because for women, especially when you get married, you need to balance the life and the work. You don't have much energy to put in your work. So I think, just my opinion, I think maybe the boss prefer to give promotion with men, I think.
I think it's really important for us to be conscious of the fact that our experience nationally, and here as someone from Ireland, that we have so many different perspectives around the world, and that what we're experiencing here is very different to maybe what you experience in China, and that balance of your ability to think about your work and your life as a woman is so different. Would you say that the expectation to get married, for example, in China is, I guess the question I want to ask you is, in China, if you decided, I'm not going to get married and I'm not going to go into business and I'm going to be an artist, what would that experience be like for you? Would you, do you know people who made decisions like that, who've said, I'm not going to marry, I'm not going to work, I'm going to make art, I'm going to make music?
Yeah, I've got a friend. She was my flatmate. We live together. She's an accountant. She never has a boyfriend. I don't know why, but she told me she don't want to get married. How a marriage is quite difficult. Maybe, I guess, she just want to focus on her work, her job, and she's doing well. She's doing really well in her own position. And last year, we talked, and she told me her boss raised her salary.
Go girl.
Excellent, that's wonderful. Paula, you have any imposter syndrome?
Well, I am a working class person from what's called a PUL community in Belfast, the Protestant Unionist Loyalist Identity, and I did an Arts and Humanities PhD, so yes, I am well acquainted with imposter syndrome, because you're not supposed to do any of these things. You're not supposed to get an education or be arty-farty where I come from, so that's probably an indication of me being quite rebellious. But also it's amazing how many from that community are really rebellious and do those things. People from working class backgrounds, there's just something intrinsically artistic about people, and they need and desire an outlet. You have to break through a lot of social norms to be yourself, even if yourself isn't really that radical a thing to the rest of society, do you know?
Jenni, do you have any thoughts?
I was considering my own constant imposter syndrome and how it feels like it can live very much in your work, and you can spend days where you feel like you want to roll, and then you're like, you're writing something down, you're drawing something, and it's just saying like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And aside from any issues with ego and feeling like you're not worth it and all of that, I think the sad reality is a female presenting person, artist, is that it's almost like it's been ingrained in you. Like I've come from a music background as well, and I was in a jazz band that never ever regarded itself as a female fronted band, but every single bill we were on, they were like, female fronted band, well dressed female fronted band. And I'm like, no, that's not the necessary thing to get people to come. And then now I feel like I have this kind of issue with being written down or regarded as a feminist poet, and please don't smash me right away, because of course that is inherent. Of course my work is going to be pro-women, it's going to be pro any marginalised person and group, but that shouldn't be. Like, why do we have the female artist trope? We don't have the men artist trope, man artist. Look at this. Like, and I realise it's because it's something to, I guess, be proud of. Is that why people do it? I don't know, but it bothers me. I get regarded as that a lot on bills.
I think it's to put you in your place.
It
a
is.
little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe we should start using the term, oh, this male poet, oh,
Well, that's
this
it.
male radio broadcaster, oh, this male journalist.
Well, that's it, and it's like, it's so many years of being the only woman on a bill, and then you're waiting for the tap on the shoulder, like, oh, do you mind going first? Do you mind getting everything going for the men? And that's very frustrating. So then I'm like, oh, of course there's an imposter syndrome when you're making the work, when this is what you're met with way more often than not. Very, very frustrating. But that's why, I guess, to go back, we need to have things like community, and we need to build each other up and realise that you can't let imposter syndrome win.
With that in mind, I guess I'm going to ask Claire now, how can collaboration empower us, and why should we collaborate?
I couldn't do a huge chunk of what I do without collaborating, and basically in my work, mainly now as a creative producer for Monkfish Productions, I work with a huge range of different artists and creative people in all sorts of settings, using a range of different art forms, whether that's music, soundscape, visual arts, theatre making, and a huge part of that is collaborating. And I suppose sort of thinking about why I think collaborating is important for me is, given the sort of the current climate that we're all in, my current watchwords, if you like, for 2020 of what I call the 3 C's. Connectivity, so connecting with others, and I don't necessarily mean this just as in an artistic or a creative way, but generally is connecting with as many people as I possibly can, and also not necessarily online. I think we do a lot of spending time online, and that's great, but sometimes it's not great. Compassion, and I don't mean that in a compassion sort of way, but maybe I do, but I mean compassion in a really strong, powerful way, connecting and compassion with others. And critical thinking critically, thinking about the world from a range of different perspectives. And when I've looked at those 3 watchwords, I've thought collaboration is absolutely key from my perspective to making all of those 3 things happen, and as a creative person, making those things happen. So connecting with others, having compassion, and supporting me and others to think critically. And I think collaboration is an act of solidarity. So whether you're working with another artist to make something, or whether you're working with a community to make or to engage together in making something happen, solidarity, I love that word. It's a really active, it's not a passive word. We talk about the act of solidarity, and I think in terms of International Women's Day and where we are as just one example of those many things, I think that's really important. To build each other up, I think collaboration is really important for all of us here in terms of supporting and building each other up. I think it enriches my creative practice. Whenever I'm working with somebody, it allows me to see something from a range of different perspectives, or it supports me to make work in a way I otherwise wouldn't even think about making. So I think that's really important. I think in terms of the current climate climate, collaboration over competition, I think is massively important, particularly as alternatives to, we're talking about the patriarchy, the ghost of patriarchy, and as an alternative to capitalism and neoliberalism, that idea of collaborating and the power of that and the power to do that. And I think that's why it's no accident that humanities and arts and creative subjects are being hammered out of universities and hammered out of school, because they don't want creative critical thinkers. And that's where our work as creatives is just so vital to smashing the system, basically, and keeping it going and keeping the heart of communities going. And I think, in the current climate, keeping those stories flowing and providing women and non-binary and female people with a space to imagine the unimaginable and dream for what can be dreamed and strive to support each other to make real the realities and the spaces we wish to see, which I think is really important. And I just found this, I love this quote, real queens fix each other's crowns. And I just thought that that's just a really lush thing, and I just thought I'd throw that in there because I thought that was just a really lovely thing. And in terms of collaborating and working together, I just thought that was a really lovely thing to do and a lovely thing to think about. And also, I found a quote which I thought was really interesting from a Danish MP called Ida Auken. I'm sorry if I haven't got her pronunciation right of her name. When women leaders like me do not feel the inequality, we tend to forget something is not working. And I think that's a word that was shot across the bows about intersectionality. And, you know, I'm very conscious that to all intents and purposes, I'm a white woman and, you know, I experience a range of other privileges, and, you know, to be mindful of that and to be mindful of all of wide and different experiences as women. But then going back to collaboration, I think again that is a huge opportunity to learn from other people who have a variety of life experiences, and that was the thoughts that I came up with. But I think the power that we have is collaboration, and the power to smash the patriarchy basically through continuing to collaborate and be creative. We need creative people now like we've never needed creative people.
I just want to give you a I would like to ask Jess your thoughts on the process of wanting to take a creative path or make a new creative path in your life, in your work, in your practice, but feeling like you might have constraints by society, by culture, by gender, by finance. How do we encourage each other to kind of make either big leaps or small changes to work towards getting to where we want to be, and how do we encourage each other to do that?
I think this is something I've really felt recently. So I went from being in a full-time job for like 2 years, and then I've recently, well, it was about 6 months ago now, I left and came down to part-time. And during that time I was in that job role, even though it was in the arts, you always get yourself in a mindset, okay, I'm still being creative, I'm in an arts-related job, this is okay. And then about 3 or 4 months in, I was very, hang on a minute, I'm not doing my curation, I'm not doing what I want to do. And when I was getting opportunities to do my freelance stuff, I'd have to take holiday in my role. I'm like, why is that okay? That anyway, I then left that job role and became part-time, and while my finances are, you know, I am struggling a lot right now, but the amount of opportunities I've had and, you know, my curation's taken off out of nowhere, that I've even just said, if I was still in that job role, it probably would have taken me about 2 years still being in that job role to get what I've done in the past 6 months done. And I find that bizarre, that it's almost like a juggling process. And I think we always forget that as creative people as well. You know, a lot of people will have the job, the family, the house, and, you know, a personal life, whereas we've got all this then plus a creative practice. And I think we just get so forgetful of that sometimes, that I think I've definitely learnt recently that it needs to be that I need to listen to myself and where I am right now, and that is okay. Again, I don't know if that feeds in with this whole imposter syndrome again, but I think we get so drilled into comparing ourselves to others and what they're doing right now, that you sometimes need to think, okay, realistically, what do I need right now? That even I'm thinking now, okay, maybe I need to get these projects done, what I've got lined up, and then maybe go back into full time for a bit again, get get a bit more money and then drop it down again, and maybe that will work for me. But I think it's being mindful and supportive of the people around you as well, who may be, again, going through a similar situation. And then speaking in terms of society and culture, so I worked for the Liverpool Biennial in 2018 as a curatorial trainee, and we were having a chat with a lot of the women who were in the office, and I actually had one of my colleagues ask me, can I ask Jess, are you ever wanting to have kids in your life? Is this something you're thinking about? And I was a bit like, well, at the time I was like, I'm 23, like, no, are you kidding me? This is way off. And she was like, I'm going to tell you this now as a supportive woman in the industry, do not have children until you are in a comfortable role where if you take maternity leave you can jump right back in. And I was like, what? I was like, why is that a thing? And she was like, I'm telling you now, there's been loads of women who she knows where they've taken maternity leave and they've gone back into that organisation and then they've just dropped them like that, and then they've also had to start their creative path again. That's really not okay, and we need to be voicing that and using our voices as women to change that in the industry. It is important as women that we are not just being mindful of ourselves, but being mindful of the women around us who we get support from, and checking in with everyone and seeing if they're okay.
What advice would you give to someone in a situation where they were like, I feel trapped in what I'm in now and I want to get to a certain place? You talked about believing in yourself. Yeah. That's obviously a huge step, and I remember someone saying to me not that long ago, believe in yourself. It sent a shiver up my spine because I was like, wow, that's the first step. But it's not the only step, because there's so many challenges, and I'm just wondering how we can advise people almost, or advise our peers to understand their own path and understand their own needs. You know, like, how did you come to that point where you're like, or did you just suddenly just fall into it? I guess that's the alternative, is that sometimes it doesn't necessarily involve this drawn out thought process. Sometimes we just find ourselves in situations. What would you say to another person who was finding themselves in a similar environment to that?
To be honest with you, I do think I have been quite lucky in the opportunities I've had, but I am very driven myself anyway. I have such a strong work ethic, and again, I don't know if it's just being working class and northern, but I've always been brought up to think, you know what, if I want something, I'm going to have to work bloody hard to get it. I will get it, but I'm going to have to work bloody hard, and my mum has always said that to me, probably since it was like early ages, and I think that is just important in yourself. I think that has always been my drive, to be like, okay, I am going to be a great curator one day, but it's going to be a hard journey to get there. I don't even know, I think it is just going back to this idea of community and collaboration, that we should be using our voice with people and just really being supportive, because I know that my journey is completely different to the next person sitting next to me. And I think my advice would be to maybe, it's okay to take a step back and reflect on your journey and what you're doing, and are there people in your community, in your network, who you can have these conversations with, to be honest and open-minded and just be, you know, this is where I want to go, how do I get there? Or even if it's financial advice, even in terms of, I'm working full time but I've got a family to run, but I want to do my creative practice, is there a way of me trying to juggle that? I think it's just about reflection more than anything, and being supportive of one another.
I was just, when Jess was talking, I was reminded of this really great campaign that was started in Ireland called Waking the Feminists. And that was about essentially challenging the gender bias in arts, and particularly in theatre in Ireland. This happened after the centenary of the 1916 Rising. In 2016, the Abbey Theatre, which is the theatre in Ireland, commissioned, I can't remember the exact amounts of plays that they commissioned, or writers that they commissioned, but the majority of them were men. I think there was 2 women. Yeah, it was 2 women out of 16, and all the women and people of the country were like, hang on, what is going on? And I was just thinking about this really powerful thing that I read in a thesis that Grania Pollock wrote called Staying Awake, which was around the Waking the Feminists. I think she wrote it for her master's, and there's some really powerful quotes in it about the idea of, you have to go away to make a human person, and then you come back, and it says, women often find themselves marginalised and stigmatised, and are likely to be defined by their superiors as not committed to a career, thus losing opportunities for upward advancement. However, Orla, this is a person that they've quoted, also pointed out that motherhood actually helped her work-life balance. She said, I started leaving at 5 o'clock because I had to do creche pickups, and that was the first time in my life that I kept my hours. So it kind of was helping her to keep her hours. She believes that having my kids made me a more balanced and better worker. But for those who do resume their careers in theatre, some find they are viewed through a new unfavourable lens. Pom Boyd, an Irish writer and actor, articulates a subtle manifestation of this. Being being a mother instantly renders you as less of a thinker, less ambitious, less interesting. Fiona recalls feeling like this really old housewife that was coming out and trying to pretend to be an artist on her return to the sector. One female artist, or artist as we might say, for the purpose of this essay I think it's important that they specify though, responding to the Arts Council commissioned research on the living and working conditions of artists in Ireland, expressed an active decision not to have children as a result of the lack of support. I would never have children, she says. I chose my path knowing the conditions that lay ahead, but could not subject them on children, not without some financial security. So this is not a new thing, is it?
Yeah, it's not.
And in a lot of this activist work, or even just working as, I mean, my activism and being an artist are very much conflated. In that sort of respect, I always try to think about people and their families and how that fits in. So when I was starting this project called Most of It Is Sky, the musical of sorts, I made sure that I told people who wanted to be part of the project that people with children were welcome, that children can be involved, not to worry about commitments around childcare. Bring them with you if you want to be part of this. It's totally fine. Yeah. And the same thing in terms of activism with Acorn. One of our youngest Acorn heads is a wonderful little girl called Zuleika, who's 2.5.
Aww.
And her parents are amazing. I think a person who I look up to a lot as a researcher is her mother, Mwenza Blair. She's a researcher at Newcastle University. Our branch here in Newcastle Acorn, is specifically very open about embracing children in activism, and we were thinking about how do we facilitate having creche stuff, because you need that. And I think in a world where more women and non-binary people, trans people, even trans men who might be wanting to have children, we need to start thinking about how we provide these sort of services. And I think employers in the arts sector need to be a lot more proactive and, you know, a lot more understanding about family life and stuff like that. I mean, it's not necessarily a big thing for me, but I would fight to the ends of the earth to have that for somebody else. Again, it comes back to that idea of just supporting each other and working together and listening. I think listening is a big thing. Sometimes just having an ear to rant at, or I would say that a lot of the people who participated in the research for Waking the Feminists were just really happy to be able to be listened to about the issues that they were experiencing as women and people making theatre or making creative stuff in Ireland. And I'm sure it's the same situation here. There just hasn't been a countrywide big thing. I mean, this is a much bigger country with a bigger population. I think the fact that you're running Curatorial Collective is a really great thing. And it makes me really proud to be your friend.
Oh, darling, you're going to make me cry. But I've even just said, I just find that really weird though, that, you know, it's 2020 and I was said that I need to worry about if I want to have a child in the future. Is that okay? Is that normal? I mean, I'm sure we all think that as women anyway, but especially in the creative sector, I think, should we start a movement? I feel like maybe it needs to be, you know, something we do speak about more, because, you know, even this conversation had was just in the canteen and it was like a hush-hush kind of thing.
Radical creches.
Yeah.
Radical creches. Radical approaches to parental leave. I think we need to be more Raj, but that's always my my solution.
Let's start
more Raj.
Yeah.
I just sort of think as well, there's a wider whole set of questions there about having a family, and also for people who maybe want a different work-life balance or want a different lifestyle. Why should people be excluded from the arts and creative industries because they want family or because they have elderly relatives that they want to care for, or that they want to spend half of their life working creatively and another half with something else that they want to do? It seems that it's a wider discussion about how industries are constructed, and that is incredibly that sort of patriarchal, this is what you do, and 9 times out of 10 for a lot of people it isn't what they do. People have lives outside, and I think it makes for more creative people to not be burning the midnight candle every single night to get an exhibition up or a show on or whatever it is. So I think it just feels incredibly punishing to be saying, what, this said to you, for example, or, you know, don't have any elderly relatives, will you, that need, you know, support or care, or a spouse or a partner who needs additional support at home, or, you know. But I think it's really interesting as well in terms of gender. It's really interesting when I go to hairdressers. It's the only time I really read women's magazines, and you see the men interviewed in the magazines and they're just interviewed, and then you see the women interviewed and there's always married with so many children, or not married and doesn't have children. It's still that split. And I was always very mindful of the writer and journalist Caitlin Moran, who said she was forever being asked, when are you having children? No, but when are you actually going to have children? In an interview just about music or writing or whatever. And she kind of felt, is this a way of people actually saying to me, when are you going to get lost? When are you going to make space for a bloke to come and to inhabit this space instead? And I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, or when are you going to make space for the next woman or person who can become pregnant to take your space for that little bit of time, so they can have their, like, you know, couple of years of a career until they, like, fade into obscurity. Yeah, it's madness, isn't it?
I think there's another aspect of this as well, which is the idea that people will so openly and comfortably ask you such personal questions about your decisions and your body. That idea that it's okay to ask somebody that. I mean, it's not. I don't believe it is anyway, unless you personally know them or you know, have a logical reason to be asking that question. You wouldn't say to someone, so, what's going on with your bowels? Or tell me about your lungs today. Do you know what I mean? You wouldn't ask someone a personal question about their body. And at the end of the day, it's not just about your lifestyle. It's not just about your work or your, like, who you are. It's also about actually choosing to allow your body to do something that's so personal. The fact that we can ask someone a question about having a child, and that's okay in your place of work. Someone can say to you, oh, are you going to have children? But you wouldn't say to them, so did you have sex last night? Do you know what I mean? It's like, actually, they're completely linked. And like, why is that okay and other things are not okay? And it is something about the way that we just expect that women are going to make those decisions. And actually, you know, there's such a multitude of reasons why someone might not want to have children or might not be able to have children. And actually asking someone a question like that, you don't know who you're offending or hurting. Potentially, you don't even know if they were assigned their gender that they have at birth, and therefore you could be talking to someone who actually can't have a child, because there's so many reasons why those conversations shouldn't be forced upon us. We can choose to have them and have them in the environments that we want to, with the people that we want to have them with. But the idea that those questions should be forced upon us is just, it seems bonkers to me.
I was going to say, you've just reminded me of who was that celebrity who was asked in an interview what her favourite position was, obviously meaning a sex position, and her response was CEO. And I was like, yes, girl. But even just that question, I was like, why was she even asked that in an interview? I think it was a radio interview, and I was just like, what? You wouldn't ask a man that.
You know, on Facebook, when, like, I mean, I don't enjoy Facebook, I don't like Facebook, I still have one for some reason, but you know, when it's like, your Facebook memories, and I thought it was such an apt memory for today. It was from a couple of years ago, and it was a status that I put up where I was like, on the eve of International Women's Day, I waited with bated breath to see if one of the top human rights lawyers in the world would just be spoken to about her amazing accolades as a human rights lawyer. But no, they asked her how her marriage was going with George Clooney. And I was like, oh my god, Amal Clooney is amazing. She's an amazing human rights lawyer. What are you doing? Why are you asking about what's it like to be married to the most handsome man in the world? Who cares? Nobody asks him, what's it like to be married to one of the top human rights lawyers in the world?
It's absurd. Like, when we talk about it in this kind of lens, it is so crazy. Yet this is the norm. It's crackers. On the baby talk, I always feel very on the outside, because it's almost like it's just not applicable to me, because it's not something I'm ever going to consider. I know that, but my response, whether it's from family, friends, strangers, is always the like, no, so-and-so said that, like, you'll change your tune, like, come on. No, like, why can't you just have a definite answer? Like, I'm pretty certain of myself, and I don't think that needs to be up for debate. Thank you very much. But it's very, very frustrating, and I feel like in terms of activism and continuing the conversation and smashing and fucking over the narrative, you just have to keep questioning and I guess being not aggressive but challenging these views to people, because sadly the questions are going to keep on coming and these opinions are still live. I'm a pacifist but not where shit opinions are concerned like this, so you gotta squish them down, because that's the only way forward with these things.
I just wanted to see if there was anything else that Paula wanted to add. Have you got any thoughts on?
Yeah, probably a few. Just a quick thought on the interrogations over pregnancy and parenthood and so on. One difficulty is being interrogated so much, it makes you wonder, I don't know what my reasons are anymore for making a decision one way or another, because I'm not sure how much autonomy I have anymore. So that's just a really quick point about that. I suppose it's a nice opportunity to say that, I suppose on the issue of collaboration, and hopefully this speaks to what we're talking about more broadly as well, I just thought that the podcast is a nice example of that, because for me personally, I've been trying to transition from somebody who analyses culture to somebody who produces culture, and this podcast is a way of trying to do both at the same time, so it's straddling these different identities. I started it for me to see, can I do this? But also, as is happening today, this is a really lovely thing, is I wanted to be able to use it to platform other people. So this is a really nice collaborative effort that I hope will be the first of many more to come. So thank you all so much.
Thank you. Thank you everyone.
So it's about lifting each other up, pulling each other up for me.
Absolutely, yeah.
And just being a part of that's really nice.
And you are producing it right now. I'm seeing so wonderful work. Do you have any thoughts on any of the things we've talked about just now?
It's lovely to be here, and something you talk about, I've never thought about. When are you gonna have a baby or get pregnant? I thought before this is nothing, but it's normal for me. But today I know it's not normal. It's kind of inequality, right? For asking women, why do you ask a man this question?
Do you remember the last time someone asked you about whether or not you would be a mother?
Mother is, I haven't been asked, but when do you want to get married? I often been asked this question. It's my house, it's my thing, it's not your business.
How does it make you feel when someone asks you, do you want to get married?
Annoying, very annoying about this question.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Wow, this has been so, I feel like this is the beginning of something to be continued. I think maybe that's where we can go from there. That was lovely. Thanks so much.
You've been listening to Audiovisual Cultures with me, Paula Blair, Rachel Brook, Claire Murphy-Morgan, Ciara Lenihan, Jessica Bennett, Jenni McDermott and Caroline. This episode was produced by Rachel Brook, recorded by Paula Blair and Rachel Brook, and edited by Paula Blair. The music is Common Ground by Airtone, licensed under a Creative Commons Non-Commercial 3.0 attribution, and is available at ccmixter.org. Episodes are released every other Wednesday. Subscribe on your podcast app so you never miss a new release. We can't currently cover the costs of hosting, but the full back catalogue can be found on my YouTube channel if you search for PEA Blair, and it's also linked to Patreon on the episode page of audiovisualcultures.wordpress.com. If you can contribute funding to continue this work, regular donations to liberapay.com/PEA Blair or one-off donations to paypal.me/PEA Blair are hugely appreciated. Be part of the conversation with AV Cultures Pod on Instagram and AV Cultures on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you so very much for listening. Catch you next time.